fact, I see more possibilities in adversity than in, say, lying on satin pillows. So in that respect, I guess I am an optimist. I think there's reason for optimism. I think there's reason for, at least for personal optimism. I don't know if the world is going to survive, but I'm going to go as long as my heart beats.
Well, your book should have political consequences, although you nowhere demand reform. This book should surely be a bestseller in New York City at least, telling us what most of us really had no idea about, is what the life of a homeless person is like. Nowhere do you mourn the existence of the homeless, but anybody reading the book is bound to say, my God, something's got to be done about this.
Yeah. And well, there is, that's a tough one. I've never seen, man tries to be a sociologist all the time, but the truth is, if you look around, we really suck at it. So I don't know if there's, anything, to be done about what? Eliminating it, moving these people, getting them out of our face, feeding everybody. I don't know what's to be done about it except to find what your relationship is to it. I think that's the only work. I don't think the work is to eliminate what offends our sense of what should be or who we are. I think the work is to find a relationship to it. Just when you pass somebody on the street, what is your relationship with them? How are you a human being to them? And beyond that, I think anything beyond that is bullshit.
You used to sell street news, and you started writing for street news, and then I guess you became probably their top writer. Were you editor-in-chief finally?
I was editor-in-chief when they decided they couldn't pay any more salaries and everybody else left.
Yeah, but you got to sleep on the couch in the office.
I got to sleep on the couch in the office, which was a good deal.
But I confess I haven't read street news the way I should have. Were there editorials in there about what should be done about the homeless?
There were some. There were often some, and there was never any accord because it's like trying to push a waterbed flat. You push it here and it pops up over there. And I found I have a prior history of sociology in coming up black in the '60s, and here it's 60 years later. And billions of dollars and lots of speeches and countless laws, and all I'm hearing these days is, whoops, we made a mistake. So I really don't have a lot of faith in installing a perfect society or even a pro forma solution to any kind of social problems. Very, very much so. But I admit, when I was in those days, I wrote a couple of begrudging, I wish so-and-so would get off of his this, and I wish people would do that type editorials. But for me, the fun stuff was that when I could just riff on my own, just go on about what's inside of my head. That was an amazing thing, to be on the streets and not be heard, as Joe Homeless, but just be able to have a place where I can just riff from my own mind. That's a very amazing, remarkable, and wonderful place to be in the middle of the 1990s, or in the 80s. It was a wonderful place to be. I was rich in that respect. The average person who had a home didn't have that. So it was a wonderful forum for me. Editorials I always find are just the agenda that's attached to events. And I got very tired of writing them. I don't suppose I wrote many of them all that well. But the stuff I like was writing about people, places, and things, and first-person stuff. But I sure love that couch. So,
do you run into old friends who are still on the street?
Yeah, I do. I do.
And
all the time.
is your impulse to rescue him or to do something for him?
Not at all.
Well, you're not a very nice guy.
No, actually, I'm not very presumptuous either. I barely rescued myself, and one thing I noticed from being on the street is that looking the other way is that all of us are really, everybody in this room is really just sort of groping their way around in life. We grab one of the things that tell us we got it all figured out, but I bet if I asked a show of hands of how many people just had a littlest bit of doubt that they don't have it all figured out, I bet you everybody would raise their hand. So in that respect, it's kind of presumptuous to, I think, to try to know how you can save the next person. At least for me, this may surprise a lot of people to hear me say, but it's an honest answer. I'm still working on, saving myself is going to be a lifetime job. So I don't know if I can really get to the point where I have time or the wherewithal to save the next guy. I don't know what's right for you. I wouldn't presume to tell you right now.
Well, you gave us a wonderful gift in the process of
Thank you.
of building your soul. I must say, thank you. It's really a swell book, and I compared him to Jack London because are you going to read the part where he realizes he can write?
No, we don't have that part.
Yeah. Well, tell the story, Lee. Where were you when you discovered you really could write?
Well, that story's been like really. I really wish I could wiggle out of that one because that's been hammered into the ground. But I was just sitting there with a pencil. I'll say that much, and a pencil that I was using as a drug implement to push the screens in my pipe. And one day I didn't have any drugs, and I decided to use it as a pencil. I'm sort of smart that way. Because I was going to use that pencil some way or another that day. And I started writing, and the remarkable thing was it was 5 hours later before I stopped. That was really remarkable. I don't think I did anything for 5 hours in a row during that time except try to get high and then try to outrun the effects of getting high. I don't think there was anything else I did with that much concentration. It was a remarkable moment.
Well, I identified him with Jack London because Jack London had the same sort of experience. He had hit bottom and he was working in a steam laundry, and he decided, God, there's something better than this. And he started writing, and it turned out he could really do it. And ask us a question.
Well, I think this is a good place to read a little bit from each of the books. The first is a passage from Grand Central Winter. It's one of those bright, glorious Indian summer days, gold dust streaming through the front windows of the Street News editorial office, treetops across 9th Avenue swaying gently in the breeze, and I'm standing hunched over my desk, teeth clenched, cursing, muttering at the printer, one of those worthless low-end Panasonic dot matrix jobs with a temperament all its own, sitting in frozen silence, red error light blinking dumbly back at me, refusing to print so much as a digit. And what keeps running through my mind is, why am I doing this? But I know why. I did it to myself. I went and got myself an honest job. Not that I was looking. I had an income. I sold papers, as many and for as long as my needs required. I didn't really feel I was missing anything out of life by being on the street either, at least not anything that could be had by paycheck. And I wasn't really interested in being employed simply for the sake of it. What I wanted was to do something worth a bit of satisfaction as well as a buck, something that might make a difference. I imagined that as a writer, I might help light up Street News' pages and that this might help it emerge from its doldrums. I was wrong, of course. Not that I'm complaining exactly. I enjoy working with words. That part of the job delivers a certain satisfaction. But as for any of my work making a real difference in the larger scheme of things, as for having had any impact on the growing public resentment toward homeless people, I've had to climb down from that high horse. From Timequake. I have taught creative writing during my 73 years on automatic pilot, rerun or not. I did it first at the University of Iowa in 1965. After that came Harvard and then the City College of New York. I don't do it anymore. I taught how to be sociable with ink on paper. I told my students that when they were writing, they should be good dates on blind dates, should show strangers good times. Alternatively, they should run really nice whorehouses. Come one, come all. Although they were, in fact, working in perfect solitude. I said I expected them to do this with nothing but idiosyncratic arrangements in horizontal lines of 26 phonetic signals, 10 numbers, and maybe 8 punctuation marks, because it wasn't anything that hadn't been done before. In 1996, with movies and TV doing such good jobs of holding the attention of literates and illiterates alike, I have to question the value of my very strange, when you think about it, charm school. There is this. Attempted seductions with nothing but words on paper are so cheap for would-be ink-stained Don Juans of Cleopatras. They don't have to get a bankable actor or actress to commit to the project, and then a bankable director and so on, and then raise millions and millions of buccarinis from manic depressive experts on what most people want. Still in all, why bother? Well, here's my answer. And many people need desperately to receive this message. I feel and think much as you do, care about many of the things you care about, although most people don't care about them. You are not alone. So that leads to the question of why do we do what we do, whether writing or anything else?
Well, since you billed me as the new Jack London, I'll have to say it beats working in a laundry. But for me, the reason I do it is it's the first thing I completely chose to do on my own. I tried on my own, made up myself, and kind of found that I could do all right at it. That's almost 90% of it. And also, I guess there's 10% of the fact of that I find it's very good for me. So then that leaves maybe a 0.5% where I hope it'll be good for you guys. I don't mean to be stingy, but I found that when I try and do it the other way, that I overdo it, and then it's good for no one.
Well, there's a swell book that's out of print now. Maybe 7 Stories will bring it out again. It's called The Writer and Psychoanalysis by a man who's now dead named Edmund Burglar. And he said he claimed he had treated more writers than, and he was practicing in New York, of course. He had treated more writers than anybody else in his field. And he said that writers were fortunate in order that they were able treat their neuroses every day by writing. And he said as soon as a writer was blocked, this was catastrophic because the writer would start to go to pieces. And so I said in a piece for Harper's, or a letter I wrote to Harper's about the death of the novel, that people would continue to write novels or maybe short stories because they would discover that they are treating their own neuroses. And I have said about practice of the arts that practicing any art, is painting, music, dance, whatever, literature, is not a way to make a money or to become famous. It's a way to make your soul grow. So you should do it anyway. And what Bill Gates is saying now, and How much were they offering to kill Salman Rushdie? $1 million. I'll pay
billions.
anybody here $1 million who kill Bill Gates. Because but
Let's see the money.
he's saying, you know, hey, don't worry about making your soul grow, because I'll sell you a new program. Is that let your computer grow year after year after year, and cheating people out of the experience of becoming.
You know, I saw a book being written about in one of the papers today, and the book was about how to hold on to power or be powerful, and at the face of it, you know, it seems like, you know, a go 90s book. When you think about it, some of the advice he was giving people in the book was like totally anti-human. It was like make people depend on you, you know. People buy books to learn how to do this. It said one of his things was, don't say much, people will think you're smart, you know. So I wondered why he wrote the book, you know. So when you're shooting Bill Gates, if your bullet misses, I hope it hits this guy.
We have another passage, this one from Grand Central Winter. Afterwards, we'll ask another question. This describes an encounter at the Central Booking Holding Cell. Early that evening, the cell gates clanged open and the CO ushered in a thin, bare-chested Spanish kid wearing hospital green pajama bottoms splattered with crimson. His arms were swathed wrist to elbow in bandages, and he was grinning ear to ear. "They had to keep my shirt for evidence," he announced to no one in particular, holding his damaged arms aloft like trophies, and then, without prompting, he launched with relish into his war story. He and his crew were doing a burglary. Cops surprised them in the middle of it. He took a bullet in one arm, trying to escape. This was a matter of particular pride. And he'd done in the other arm scrambling over razor wire, so they had to patch him up at Bellevue before they could book him. All in all, it was a Hollywood-worthy night out for a restless teen. "They tell me I'm a career criminal," he gushed. "Incorrigible." Everyone was duly impressed. I was both captivated and unsettled by his moxie, though I never let on. I was puffing on a cigarette, contemplating how much of it to leave for the guy who had begged the short from me, when I saw the kid move for the Jersey boy. "I like that rope, homeboy," he said, leaning his face into Jersey's. "Let me get that chain." Something in his hand was pressing against Jersey's jugular. Incorrigible. But this was just the thing to break the monotony of sitting on your butt awaiting the pleasure of the court. The holding cell sprang to life. A circle of inmates formed too deep around Jersey and the kid. If we were going to be treated to a throwdown, they were determined to keep the COs at bay for as long as possible. But Jersey had had enough fisticuffs for one night, apparently. He didn't give up the chain, but he did yell for help. I heard keys rattle in the gate. A second later, correction officers were elbowing their way through the human blockade, but the kid, who could have easily just ditched the shiv, remained oblivious to them. He just stood there, menacing Jersey, while the guards broke through and grabbed him, and as they hauled him off to book him on an additional charge, I caught a glimpse of his face. His smirk was wider than ever. Most of us in the cell could expect a walk. We knew if we just bided our time and let the criminal justice grind take its course, we could get back to whatever it was we were doing with a minimum of hassle. The kid, though, knew he wasn't going anywhere. He was a career criminal. He also knew that with his good looks, youth, and diminutive size, it was better to go inside with a don't-give-a-fuck badass rap preceding him. In that respect, he was, for all of his bravado, only being practical and buying in on the cheap for all that. When it comes to justice, the kind that gets you locked up is different from the kind you find inside. Personally, I would like to see all the judges and district attorneys made to do time. Not for the crimes they commit from the bench, for they commit those out of ignorance, which is precisely why time in prison should be part of their qualifications, so that they might come to know what they don't know they don't know. Let them sit faceless and despised in the holding cells. Let them be run through the ringer of their process until the wind has been wrung out of their self-righteousness, and let them stumble on the wisdom every two-bit con knows instinctively, that real justice is always poetic. So the question... The question is, there is the adventure of life and there is our need to understand it. What might be the relationship between those two events for each of you?
Wow.
Well, I'm so kind of flummoxed here, as you write better than I do.
Well, I'll take a shot at that. The big questions like that make me nervous because, it took quite a while to write this book, and it's all packaged and it's out there, and so I don't want to say anything that is going to fuck it up, Right now, I've got everybody's confidence from the book, but there was a very, very, very big relationship between what did you call it? The adventure?
Adventure and the events of
the adventure, and it was, and I did look at the time on the street as an adventure. I looked at it that way from the very first day. I said, well, let's see what happens next. And there's a very big relationship to it because when I finally came up for air, actually I had made a big mistake out there, and I don't think the mistake was the streets. I think it was getting myself trapped all over again. It wasn't any particular thing. But at the time I got myself trapped, it was trapped into a certain cycle. And by the time, I think, once I got off the streets, I didn't know what else to do with myself. I certainly didn't want to leap back into this non-existent thing called the mainstream. And it was only the book. And I think, and I sat there for a couple of, about a year and a half, hoping to finish it. And so the relationship was that I couldn't finish it until I resolved a few things. I mean, I certainly despise just putting down exposition, telling the details, and October 4th I did this, and then that happened. I can't stand doing that. I can't sit down and do that. There are writers who can do that, reporters, for instance, who do that very well. I'd rather have my teeth grinded than do that. So I had to find reasons I had to find a way to write it and reasons to write it that were interesting to me and hopefully worth your time. Because it never occurred to me that anybody walking past a bookstore would be particularly interested in what this unknown person named Lee Stringer had to say. And that if I was lucky enough for somebody to happen to pick up a book and browse through it, I wanted to make sure that they felt they'd done a good thing and might even want to continue. But so out of that process, I found that I couldn't find a way into any of the episodes in the book until I had gotten a hold of it a little bit, till I understood what it meant to me, and not only what the people around me were doing, but why maybe. So there's by the end of writing this book, I had answered a whole bunch of questions, and I thought that was a very wonderful thing. It was almost, having it published, Dan, is almost an afterthought in that respect. Because for me, the top of the mountain was getting to the end, answering those questions for myself.
All right, well, let's cause some more trouble with the final selection. This is from Timequake. A Luddite to the end, as was Kilgore Trout, as was Ned Ludd, the possibly, but not certainly, fictitious workman who smashed up machinery, supposedly, in Leicestershire, England at the beginning of the 19th century, I persist in pecking away at a manual typewriter. That still leaves me technologically several generations ahead of William Styron and Stephen King, who, like Trout, write with pens on yellow legal pads. I correct my pages with pen or pencil. I've come into Manhattan on business. I telephone a woman who's been doing my retyping for years and years now. She doesn't have a computer either. And maybe I should can her. She's moved from the city to a country town. I ask her what the weather is like out that way. I ask if there have been any unusual birds at her bird feeder. I ask if squirrels have found a way to get in, and so on. Yes, the squirrels have found a new way to get to the feeder. They can become trapeze artists if they have to. She's had back trouble in the past. I ask how her back is. She says her back is okay. She asks how my daughter Lily is. I say Lily is okay. She asks how old Lily is now, and I say she'll be 14 in December. She says, 14, my gosh, it seems like only yesterday she was just a little baby. I say I have a few more pages for her to type, and she says, good, I will have to mail them to her since she doesn't have a fax. Again, maybe I should can her. I'm still on the 3rd floor of our brownstone in the city, and we don't have an elevator, so down the stairs I go with my pages. Clumpity, clumpity, clumpity. I get down to the 1st floor where my wife has her office. Her favorite reading when she was Lily's age was stories about Nancy Drew, the girl detective. Nancy Drew is to Jill what Kilgore Trout is to me. So Jill says, where are you going? I say, I am going to buy an envelope. She says, you are not a poor man. Why don't you buy 1,000 envelopes and put them in a closet? She thinks she's being logical. She has a computer, she has a fax, she has an answering machine on her telephone, so she doesn't miss any important messages. She has a Xerox, she has all that garbage. I say, I'll be back real soon. Out into the world I go. Muggers, autograph hounds, junkies, people with real jobs. Maybe an easy lay. United Nations functionaries and diplomats. Into the news store I go. Relatively poor people with lives not strikingly worth living are lined up to buy lottery tickets or other crap. All keep their cool. They pretend they don't know I'm a celebrity. The store is a ma and pa joint owned by Hindus, honest to God Hindus. The woman has a teeny weeny ruby between her eyes. That's worth a trip. I mean, who needs an envelope? You must remember this, a kiss is still a kiss, a sigh is still a sigh. Now, I know the Hindu stock of stationery as well as they do. I didn't study anthropology for nothing. I find one 9x12 manila envelope without assistance, remembering simultaneously a joke about the Chicago Cubs baseball team. The Cubs were supposedly moving down to the Philippine Islands where they would be renamed the Manila Folders. Be a good joke about the Boston Red Sox, too. I take my place at the end of the line, chatting with fellow customers who are buying something other than lottery tickets. The lottery ticket suckers, decorticated by hope and numerology, may as well be victims of post-Timequake apathy. You could run them over with an 18-wheeler. They wouldn't care. From the news store, I go 1 block south to the postal convenience station, where I am secretly in love with a woman behind the counter. I've already put my pages in the manila envelope, I address it, and then I take my place at the end of another long line. What I need now is postage. Yum, yum, yum. The woman I love, who is there, does not know that I love her. You want to talk about poker faces. When her eyes meet mine, she might as well be looking at a cantaloupe. I put the waiting time to good use. I learn about stupid bosses and jobs I'll never have, about parts of the world I will never see, about diseases I hope I'll never have, about different kinds of dogs people have owned, and so on. By means of a computer? No. I do it by means of the lost art of conversation. I at last have my envelope weighed and stamped by the only woman in the whole world who could make me sincerely happy. With her, I wouldn't have to fake it. I go home. I have had one heck of a good time. Listen, we are here on Earth to fart around. Don't let anybody tell you any different.
Amen.
Which leads to the last question, which is, do you agree that there is a place beyond the text that readers are experiencing when they read you? And if so, what is the place beyond the words that you write?
Well, as I've said, our audience has to be performers, and so they have brought themselves, they have done work in order to decode these messages on the page, and so because they are involved, they become our partners, they've brought themselves to it. That's the extra dimension about which we know nothing, but it's delightful to know that they can bring themselves to it. They have to, or they can't read.
I don't know quite how I could say. I can tell it in a story, maybe, because I sense there's another dimension, but I can't quite nail it down. But I can tell this story, which may get near there. It was while I was on the street one day. I was walking down 42nd Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. It's the middle of the afternoon. It was kind of a gray day. And what I had coming towards me was sort of a marching army. People just slogging along in the middle of the day. Nobody was smiling. Everybody was walking, going to wherever they were going or coming from wherever they'd been. And if you really looked at it, they were all suffering in a sense. It was just a burden to go through what was their day. And as I got near the end of the corner, I hear the tinkle of a piano, and I see above the heads, all these gray heads, this one pink sort of melon-shaped thing going like this. And I got nearer and nearer the corner, and I found out it was a preacher from Jersey. He'd set up these huge speakers on the end of 42nd Street, which I call God's Corner. And he was playing this very bright, very modern gospel music in the middle of this very gray, very sad kind of day. And he was just leaping up and down with joy. And just no reason for it. He just set up these speakers and he was dancing in the streets and he was smiling and he was bouncing around and people were walking by. And as I came abreast of him, the sun broke through the clouds. It was almost prophetic. And a light burst on it and it's turning his pink face iridescent. And I said to myself, God, no, that's where I want to be, where this guy is. And you know, that's the kind of dimension I'd like to. I'd like to be less direct, but more just people to just sort of read and say, well, you know, that's where I'd like to be. As simple as that. Thank you.
I just want to add that virtually every writer I know would rather be a musician.
Why?
Because music gives pleasure as we never can. Music is the most pleasurable and magical thing we can experience. And I'm honorary president of the American Humanist Association, but I simultaneously say that music is the proof of the existence of God.
You play an instrument, by the way?
I play a clarinet badly, and I really had no gift for it whatsoever. And I'll tell you, our president is no bad reed man. He's not bad. I've heard him play. That nobody has brought that in his defense.
That man can really blow, so to speak. Sorry.
What do you think is the relationship, say, between the Kurt Vonnegut and the lead stringer who's sitting here and the one that the reader encounters in a book?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't know. Well, you go first on this one.
Well,
You're on the roll.
I would. One nice thing about our trade is compared with poetry or with painting, and possibly with music, is we don't envy each other. Is Whistler, James McNeill Whistler, the painter, said if you wish to see envy, go among the painters. But novelists do not envy each other, and if a writer succeeds, makes a lot of money, that makes all other writers happy. And so it's a most agreeable field we're in, and I think, in a sense, we are veterans of the same battle, and we know what the hell it was like. You know, we're not like Duke Wayne, who was never in a battle. But we know what that fight is like, and we respect each other for making it. And anyone who has finished a book, whether the thing has been published or not, whether the thing is any good or not, is a colleague of ours.
For me, I read Kurt's books when years ago. I read them just, I never wanted to be trendy, so I read them just after everybody else read them. And then I was sorry I had waited so long. But when I heard that Kurt liked my book, it was like meeting a comrade. I mean, it was to have another writer speak favorably about your work is just a great feeling, because it is kind of it's not a science. We're not making porcelain. We're not, you know, cutting out 2x4s. It's kind of crazy stuff to just sit in a room and click away at well, in my case, if you'll forgive me, a Mac. For 8 or 9 hours is a very unnatural thing to do, and there's no one there to tell you whether what you're doing right or wrong. You just sort of it's a very scary thing for me. I mean, to spend a year or so doing that, and the real fear is that you'll look back and say, gee, I wasted a year doing nothing. So in the midst of that loneliness, to have another writer say, well, you know, you did all right, is a great thing, and in that respect, I feel like Kurt's a comrade for life, and then rereading some of his stuff and reading some of his interviews and hearing his comments. It wasn't just I thought we were real comrades, because there is something that a lot of writers I've read about who've talked about writing, especially modern day writers such as Kurt and James Baldwin is someone I've read, and Ralph Ellison and Nelson Algren, is there is something we all do that's similar. We sort of futz about saying what that is, but I can hear it resonating in the words of all these people. So that's about as I sort of overworked that little thought, but thank you for listening.
I always liked Jacqueline Suzanne, who was, I considered her a colleague, and critics wouldn't like me, a person as pretentious as myself, to like Jacqueline Suzanne. But I did like her very much, and she wrote with utter sincerity, or people would not have bought these books. As you cannot fool a reading audience. And she was sincere with all her storytelling, and a very nice thing happened between Jacqueline Suzanne and myself before we met. Valley of the Dolls, I think it was #1 on the bestseller list for, I don't know, 2 years, something like that. Entertained a lot of people, and I finally knocked her off with Breakfast at Champions, which was very briefly #1 on the bestseller list. And I got a note from this woman who was a stranger at that time. She said, as long as it had to be someone, I'm glad it was you. Isn't that graceful?
You spoke of Lee before as a born writer. Do you feel that you were a born writer as well?
I don't know. Yes, I think so, because some people are born musicians, some people are born chess players or whatever, and in school, some people could run a lot faster than I could write better than most people could. So yes, I got lucky. Joe Heller and I recently confessed something. It was shameful for two writers to confess to each other. We had both had relatively happy childhoods, which is which is no way for a writer to begin. What about yours, Lee? It's none of my business.
It was happy to me.
Yeah.
It was happy to me. I was angry, but I was happy at the same time. I don't know if you can understand that. I wasn't satisfied. Maybe that has an impact. But you know, I tried to write when I was younger a few times, but it was never about anything. I mean, I like to play with words. I certainly like to read a lot. But it was never about anything that I knew anything about. It was always about, you know, spies and trips to outer space and things I didn't know anything about. And it had nothing to do with any characters. So I get about, you know, I get a great first paragraph. And then I have a trunk full of first paragraphs somewhere that might become a book one day if I get lucky.
You want some tips on writing?
Sure. Well, you know, for me, I have fun discovering. I have a lot of fun bumping into discover. It's a joy of discovery for me. I kind of would not like to know what I'm doing. I had a lot of fun trying to figure out how I'm going to fill up these pages, and then convinced that I'm not, and then bingo, something happened. It's like shaking hands with God for a second. It's really a great payoff for the hours you sit around wondering if you can do what you're trying to do.
Once again, a proof of God, I think. Sculptors, of course, feel that somebody else is using their hands, that they couldn't possibly be doing this. Anyway, the arts are so good to those who practice them. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, did you ever get, now that I have you here, I wanted to talk to you in private, that hasn't happened yet, but there's one question I wanted to ask you. Do you find you get to a point when you're writing when it's almost like taking dictation?
Well, I'll have to think about that. Yeah, in a way, as I had never thought about that image before. Yes, I guess so. I feel I'm lucky as hell. As again, I can't really do this. Somebody else must be doing this, like taking dictation. But again, I've written a hell of a lot of crap. It had been published, most of it, but I would come to work and write all day, or write for 3-4 hours. And this is lousy. Have you done that?
Absolutely. There's 2 other Grand Central Winters in the drawer.
Well, that may be a good place to end, I think. Kurt Vonnegut, Lee Stringer, thank you very much for coming. The book is Grand Central Winter by Lee Stringer and Timequake.